Ultimately, I want to tell you what happens for couples.
I've always had a question.
It depends on the commitment.
I see.
If you're cohabiting and there's
How can you tell if that person is committed?
that, communication is the answer to all relationships.
And then all of a sudden, something happens.
But then the reality hits, and also the expectation changes. When you commit to, I'm going to live with you, that's different from I'm going to date you.
Who does exactly that?
We know that play is essential for children's mental.
Line up a bunch of pictures and you're swiping left and right.
Phones don't go to a dinner date.
So what are the harms in that?
We think we can read everyone's body language. We think, well, I've been with you for 10 years. I know exactly why you do what you do. No, you do not.
Sherry, what is it that you do?
I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in the city of Orange. I primarily serve families and couples. I have some small children, and that's what I do.
I've always had a question with the modern, modern, as we're going toward modernization of the world and all that. More and more couples are getting into habits of cohabitation compared to traditional marriage and all that. Are there any differences in the outcome of those families?
There is some research around the difference. Ultimately, I want to tell you what happens for couples is it depends on the commitment that they start with. If you're going to choose to cohabit, your commitment may be different than if you're choosing marriage. Marriage has also ethical and religious components to it. So some people feel, the research talks about the fact that some people are more committed because they've decided this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. And cohabiting people may not have that. They may hold that view, but not necessarily.
I see. From your experience so far that you've been in therapy for many years,
Almost 20 now, yeah.
is there any difference in how stable the families are in cohabiting or the level of satisfaction in cohabiting or traditional families?
I don't know if we measure satisfaction with the adults and their choices so much as we try to look at what happens in the family, which means if children are involved. If you're cohabiting and there's no children, then your satisfaction really is going to come back to, are you doing what you value? And are you with someone who shares that value? When you're in a marriage, it's the same thing. So that part doesn't change much. But once you introduce children and have a family, then the difference is we start to look at the differences because children are affected differently in those two situations.
Well, how can we tell if we're in a meaningful relationship or if, let's say, if you're with a person, how can you tell if that person is committed and you can have children with them and that person's going to stay with you or at least have a stable life?
Raise the child with you, not leave you holding just the child, right? Yeah. Well, I think that communication is the answer to all relationships. Really knowing going in what it is you want and what you expect, and then making sure that the other person can also articulate that. And then if you have a difference, to begin to work on that prior to the commitment to cohabitate. What happens so often, I'll see couples who met, did well for 3 months, but didn't ever think about how it will change when it's day to day and I'm going to see you 24 hours a day, kind of a thing. Yeah.
Actually, I've seen that too, yeah. Some couples, they get together for the first few months
Right.
or even a year. They are attached to each other.
Right.
Yeah, every day you'll see them, they're happy. And then all of a sudden, something happens. They're not together anymore. They hate it. They hate each other. They don't want to. They don't even want to see each other.
Well, because they don't look at the reality. There's a lot of romance in first getting together, even if it's up to a year or 2 years. I've seen couples together 2 and 3 years who marry and then all bets are off and then they just suddenly don't like one another. There's a sense of romance that stops us sometimes from looking at what will it actually be like to live with someone. You know, we have maybe lived alone or we've had roommates, but more likely we don't have the same emotional investment. When I get emotionally invested in another person, then I have different expectations. I want different things. When I'm just dating them or I'm with them, I don't tend to put as many demands either side because I'm still enjoying the romance of it and the connection of it. And then the reality, when I start to live together, somebody has to do the dishes, somebody has to walk the dog, somebody has to do all of the practicalities of life start to show up. And that's usually not been looked at or planned. At least that's my experience with cohabiting couples. And I'll say to them, well, did you talk about that? Did you talk about how you would handle the money differences? How will you handle a dog? What will you do? Well, no, we didn't think of that because we were having so much fun and we were getting along. But then the reality hits, and also the expectation changes. When you commit to, I'm going to live with you, that's different from I'm going to date you and love you. I have other things in my life and you're not my primary. But when you start to cohabit, you pretty much rely on each other.
So, how can we define romance? What is it? What are some of the components of a
Well, as soon
romantic
as I can answer
relationship?
that, I can retire and I'll be rich and it'll be great. Romance. Romance is that feeling of some way or another this person physically, emotionally, intellectually feel like my person. I feel connected. I feel better when I'm with them. I think romance helps us feel alive, full of life, full of hope, because there's this connection, which, it's like when they talk about chemistry. Yeah. So chemistry, I don't think the research always talks about that, but it's pretty necessary. There has to be something about you that attracted me to you, that causes me to want to open up to you and be involved with you. So I think romance is the process of keeping that feeling alive. But as you move forward, life has a way of saying, well, yeah, I didn't realize he didn't sleep in pajamas. He sleeps in these grungy shorts. Or, why doesn't she get up and do her hair? She doesn't wear makeup anymore. The reality of how we live day to day as who we are begins to kind of wane. And so romance has to be nurtured. It has to be, we tell couples all the time, it is important to say, this is our time together. Let's keep dating, so to speak, as we go forward.
Okay, so it's similar to being in a relationship is kind of like a job then, that both people have to work for the common goal to keep it alive.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And if it's one-sided, it won't work. Just like if you were dating and suddenly, your person kept saying, I only want to go to sporting events, and you love the opera, and you can't, when you're dating, you tend to say, well, he'll get you, he'll come along. Or she'll get with it. She'll get into sports. I'll take her to games. It doesn't work that way. It's really important that you communicate even during that romantic period. Is this person meeting my needs, what I want, separate from what they want? And then can I support what they want? Is that mutual?
Yeah, I heard a lot of different opinion towards whether the person that you're getting into a relationship
Right.
should have similarities or differences. I mean, yeah, the opinions or perspective that I've seen throughout the years been mixed. Some people are saying that a person that you're choosing has to be the opposite. Some people are saying they have to have they got to be similar to you. Which one is more correct? Is it like a mix of both?
Yeah.
Do they have to share the same goals and values, or should they be similar? Or is that something that we kind of made up, or it's not real?
Well, if we read it on the internet, we cannot trust it, right? I think the most important thing in a relationship to sustain it is that you have shared values. How you express and live those values might be different. You might be attracted, for example, if one of my values is integrity. I want to have integrity in everything I do. How that looks and how I will do it in my profession is different. I might be attracted to someone who just appears to be cavalier about that. But yet if I talk with him and her, and I watch and I say, how do you handle that? But like values are really important because as time goes on, we really try to live what we believe and what our beliefs come from our values. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is no right way to do a relationship. I wish that were true. I mean, there's 100 billion books about it, and depending on which book you read, but it doesn't necessarily work for you. But I think we all know that we have to have like values and enjoy sharing that. But you're on the same path then. and trying to grow something, I think the most important thing you can do is pay attention to how you think and feel. We tend to want to please when we're first in a romantic or a connection. I want you to ask me out again. I want you to want to be with me or to share me with your friends, whatever. And so I tend to be more pleasing. When it becomes one-sided and I still try to please, I still try to say, oh, he didn't really mean that. He was in a bad mood. And then when I ignore those signs as they start to appear, then I almost create my own toxicity. Then the relationship can't grow and it won't be healthy because it's one-sided.
I see. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I've seen some people who does exactly that. Usually look for signs to just get out of a relationships.
Well, some people, there are books also about people's fear of commitment. And so sometimes you move along and you're feeling really good, and then one partner will say, hey, this is really going well. We both value, long-term relationship. Are you ready to commit to this, to stay in it, to work through the bugs that will show up and the obstacles that will appear? And that's where you start to also see a problem, because some people are very commitment phobic. They don't want, nope, no, I'll just go. I'll leave now. And so I think commitment, it gets involved there.
Yeah, is that? I mean, what's the reason for the people that are not trying to commit? Is that something psychological? Is it like something from the past that a bad experience they had, or what is it that makes them so scared that they don't want to, commit to a relationship?
Well, I think I would tell you as a therapist, I think most of our issues come from what we learned about ourselves and how to be in life as we grew up. And so sometimes we had good role models, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we've been hurt by life in an innocent way. I have a friend whose fiance was killed in a car accident when she was in college. So then when she would attach to someone in the future, she thought they might die. So I'm not going to get that close to them. So I'm going to just step back. So we learned, these behaviors are learned. And learning to commit comes from a level of security within myself, that I'm saying, no, I'm willing to jump in here. I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to make this happen. Yeah, I think most things come from childhood, but from childhood, in that what we learned. Behavior is learned. It's not innate.
Yeah,
it's learned. And so we sometimes along the way we've learned it's not safe. I can't be myself. I feel trapped. A lot of times you'll hear that. They'll say, I feel trapped. I felt fine before, but now I feel trapped. Okay, well, tell me about what did it feel like? And then you might hear that parents divorced and I never could get out of visiting my grandmother that I didn't like, or whatever. So somewhere along the way we learned it might be safer to stay unto myself.
So they just stay in their comfort zone and they don't want to get out.
They very rarely want. My experience, you can have a couple and you can come down to, are you willing to commit to fixing this? And you'll hear, well, we'll see.
Is that something that we see mostly in introverts or extrovert, or it doesn't really matter?
No, that wouldn't make any, other than if you've got two extroverts, you're going to have more arguing probably than if you have one introvert and an extrovert.
So opposite attracts.
Well, there is something to that, I think, because I think that we all kind of like ourselves as we are, but we appreciate when people can be different. I'm more calm around someone who is a little bit more introverted because I'm so extroverted. And so I appreciate that they might say, whoa, Sherry, wait a minute, back up. Okay, good. And then I can kind of calm down.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so after a breakup, what are some of the healthy ways a person can cope? Because usually the people I've seen that I've been close to usually turns to alcohol or drugs, which is definitely not a healthy coping mechanism.
Right. I think you have to realize that you have to go through grief. You've had an attachment. We are driven by attachment. The first things that we learn as children is it safe? Will I be cared for when I'm 100% helpless and can't help myself? And so we learn and we get attached. And so when we lose an attachment, even if it hasn't been completely joyful, well, then we think, I can't take the pain of this. I don't know what to do with the pain. And I might have had no experience. I might never have lost anyone and don't know about it. So I think we have to give ourselves permission to grieve, which means We have to say, this hurts, and I don't like this, and what else can I do? The second thing is to take a look back and then to say, can I learn anything from this? It broke up. If I hide in alcohol or drugs or some other form, I'm not going to learn anything. And then I'm going to go into the next relationship and bring it all with me, because you've got to learn a little bit with each one. That's like dating. I find dating very frustrating, but dating, you're not meant to get along and be committed to every single person you go out with, right? You're meant to say, is this one a better match or is this a better match? Right. Yeah. So you have to grieve. You have to grieve.
Yeah, that's another thing. When it comes to dating and all that, people, nowadays, again, most of the people that I've met, they are very afraid of rejection. They don't want to go out and really ask anyone out or put themselves out there to see if they can find the right mate. The question is, how can you get more comfortable with getting rejected? And yeah, just putting yourself out there.
Again, as soon as I learn that, we're going to just retire, both of us. And one of the things, because currently the world is digital and we're on dating apps, right? So we swipe and we reject all the time. I don't want that. I like that. I like that. And it's very superficial. But then someone ghosts us, contacted us and then disappears. And now we feel hurt. Like, well, what? I didn't do anything, right? So rejection is really part of the problem to me with dating apps, because you always are going to be rejected consistently and constantly. Well, it's like water dripping on a rock. You drip it on long enough, you erode the rock. So we lose our confidence. In previous days, organic dating, I call it, when I could meet you at a party, or your Uncle Fred came over or whatever, I had a chance to work through some of that and make a better decision about, do I want to go for this? Do I want to try this? This feels pretty good, but I don't know. Online, it's a picture, it's a description, and even if you thought it connected, somebody may reject you. And then you'll say, I didn't do anything. What are they rejecting? Why did they reach out? So I think dating in this era is profoundly different than it used to be, psychologically anyway.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially most of the dating apps. I've seen a video, I think it was from one of the CEOs of a dating app, that he was talking about if you swipe like around 50 times, sending 50 likes, eventually you'll get a like back and
Right.
you will get a date.
Right.
But what are some of the drawbacks of these technologies? For example, dating apps and all that. It's kind of taking away that brave side of, I guess, just going in person and asking a person out, to just sitting at home or anywhere. I mean, you can literally do it from anywhere in the world. You're just swiping on the pictures, and eventually, if you can find someone. But that's not even guaranteed, because let's say if you swipe on someone and they swipe, let's say you get a match,
Right.
but then we have all these pictures they've been taken in perfect angles and all that with
Right.
different filters.
Like Instagram, right? Where everyone's beautiful on Instagram.
Exactly.
Everybody's perfect.
Yeah. So what are the harms in that?
Well, I think they're large. It's the same as I feel about how kids are losing their ability to communicate and to socialize because they're always on a device. And there's no risks on a device. I can pretend to be, the most beautiful, sexy woman on the planet, and I can get the right photos and prove that, except that if you met me, you'd say, well, she's okay, but she's not that, right? So there's no way to be as authentic. Again, I meet you in person right away. There's almost a sense of, are you conning me? Are you real? Digital is just, I think of it as a flat photograph. I don't get to see the depth of the person. I don't get to feel their energy. I don't get to see how they move around. And I'm then always trying to do my best foot forward. I don't think that was true when we just met people. You might have met someone and thought, I don't really care about that person. I'd be kind, but I'm not trying to get them to like me. I'm now in a forum that's all strangers. I'm being rejected. I'm swiping away. I'm trying my hardest. I'm real and authentic. but you also become too self-focused. I find that with the teenagers that I work with, very self-focused. It's about me. Everything's about me and wanting to measure up. I'm not thin enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not something. Because why? Because they're in a world that's not real. And dating apps to me don't feel a lot different. It's not a real world.
I mean, especially with the concern that raised in the past few years, body dysmorphic and all that.
Oh,
People are seeing all these beautiful models and all,
right.
and in reality, most of those are extremely edited. So yeah,
Absolutely.
they're not
No,
real
it's
people.
not a real forum. And again, young kids, and even I have some smaller kids in my practice, I'm still reeling from the fact that they came out of COVID and they were all online and with permission to be all online. They've lost social skills. And then if they get sick now, they'll say to me, Miss Sherry, I think I'm going to die. And I go, what? What do you mean you think you're going to die? Well, because nothing has been real. And in COVID, there was like a suspension of reality. For 2.5 years, little people were not allowed to socialize. They weren't allowed to interact. You know, we learn from that. It's like parents that helicopter parent and don't want their child to get their hands in the dirt. Well, the way your immune system develops is you get dirty, you play, you have some fun, and you just get your hand sanitizer. These are children that are having more allergies and more problems. And the same thing is emotionally. I have more children in more trouble younger than I've ever had.
I can see that. I mean, yeah, COVID-19 did have a very profound impact on a lot of stuff, especially mental health.
Oh,
Yeah, a lot of statistics came out afterward that so
right,
many people are feeling lonely and all that.
right,
Yeah, I can see that, especially on kids, because they need someone to play with
right.
and
Well, it's
go
how
out
they
and
learn.
hang
It's
out.
like we said before. How I learned to be an adult is learned. I have to have practice, and I can't practice with just mom and dad and my siblings. You know, we know that play is essential for children's mental development. They didn't play; they played a video game, which is again not real, not authentic, and does not teach them anything about their own development. They fail in a different way, but they don't have any experience of, well, what happens when I fail? Well, what can I do? On a video game, you just switch to the next game. You don't have to problem solve. I noticed that with them. They don't have to critically think and they don't have to problem solve. They just follow an addictive process where there's a lot of lights and flashing in their face.
Yeah, actually, I had a question about virtual reality and all that. That are, I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of companies are investing huge amount of money on this virtual reality, and we got a lot of different type of headset from different companies.
Right.
I mean, let's say in a few years, because we're not as advanced right now, in a few years when we have all this virtual reality and all that, how do you think human reactions are going to be? Like, how are they going to interact with one another?
I think we're going to have more depression because we have it already. We see it already. I mean, yes, COVID caused a major shift in people's mental health, without a doubt. But it's also combined with the technological changes. It's more and more isolating. We have to interact. We're meant to connect. We're meant to be in person like this. We're not meant to be on a screen. Not that we can't have that in our life, but we also know that's an addictive process. And I think when I hear about all the virtual things, people recede into that. It's a very safe place to live. No one's demanding anything of you. These people aren't real. Where do I problem solve? Where do I critically think? Where do I learn that I can do my very best and someone might say, that's not okay? And then how do I get a job? I have a young man now that I work with who's brilliant, had just got a master's degree, wonderful, did it all online, and cannot even figure out how to interview because he doesn't know how to sell himself or how to talk about himself. Where did he ever practice that? We've eliminated socialization is what it feels like to me. And I think it's very dangerous water. I think we have to learn better ways to put limits on it.
I mean, that's definitely going to impact the people finding a partner too. Because if someone's, let's say, at home 24/7, have the headset on, or spend most of their time like they're going to work and back from work, just have the headset and they're in a virtual reality, they won't be able to find, I guess, they won't be able to create a meaningful relationship with anyone because they won't be able to find anyone.
Well, plus they don't have the skill to be real themselves. So they've had no practice. We learn how to relate to one another by relating. So I also get into this world. They also want more perfection in someone because everything online, that's perfect. When I watch it's like I used to I have one daughter and two sons, and I used to not let her watch Disney films because all the women looked like Barbie dolls. And I go, that's not how women look. Yes, you can play with them some, but you also have to learn that sometimes you don't look like that. That doesn't diminish your value. One of the other things that they've learned on research on online dating and all the swiping, people will start to say, well, that might work. But then they go, but there's all these other people. I'll just keep swiping. I might find, Megan Fox. I might find that beautiful person. No, we're real people, but they recede into fantasy, way too much fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, dating apps line up a bunch of pictures and
Oh yeah.
you're swiping left and right, whether you like that person or not.
And then they'll say, "Well, I like that person, but there might be somebody better.
Yeah.
There might be. I'll keep swiping." It's like, and I don't know. I know that I read some research about the men who designed all of these kinds of things, these apps and things. Even in Silicon Valley, these people don't allow their children on the device. They restrict it very highly because they know that they created an addictive process. It is addictive. When we can all say we're not addicted, lose your phone for 5 minutes and you lose your mind. My life is on my phone. For me, my GPS is on my phone, so I can't. But I mean, you can't, it's not real. And again, the more we retreat into that, the more we eventually harm ourselves. And I think the world will suffer for it.
Getting back to, let's say, in person and all that, if a person want to find a partner in life, someone who at least commit to a relationship and all that,
Right.
what should we look for in a person that kind of give that type of vibe that they are interested in a meaningful relationship rather than just a one night date or one night stand?
I think it's really helpful for when you're wanting that relationship, when you're seeking that, to make sure that you, for yourself, figure out, what do I want? What do I need in a relationship? There's a famous work called the 5 Love Languages. And so I recommend it to couples. It's a very simple online test. It's free, but it tells how I need you to nurture me. So you fall in love with me and you love me and I love you, but now the reality of life comes and I need to know what's going to happen if I'm hurting, if the dog dies, if I have a bad day at work. Knowing what I need enables me to teach you so you can give it to me, and vice versa. So it's really important. So I think make a list, sit down and say, yes, we want to play with the things like I want somebody 6'2" with blue eyes and absolutely gorgeous. Great, of course, that's my side. You might want a petite woman who's, smart and in the similar field. Make a list of what you want, and then think, how will I know when I see it? What will I know? How will I know? Well, it's the same way as when you made a friend. You had something in common with them, or you were able to say, you say something, you're out to dinner and you say, oh, I'm going to have dessert. I always have dessert. And you go, this is my person. This is my person. Anybody that wants dessert is my person. I'm seeing that their way of looking at something is similar to mine. And then I think, yeah, that's on my list. Yep, I need to know that. But it includes how I want to be treated. What do I want? I want somebody who bring me coffee once in a while. I want them to hold me if I cry. Know that first. And then when you get involved with that person, trust me, life will hand you tons of situations to check it out. Your list it'll show up very quickly. But then you just say, okay, so do you not eat dessert? Oh, no, I don't eat dessert, No, that's got sugar. Well, I'm out. If I can't have sugar, I'm not going to date you because we're going to argue about that all the time or you're going to fuss with me. But the same thing is true with if I make a mistake, how do I want my partner to talk to me? Do I want them to say, hey, I need to talk with you and set aside a time? Am I fearful? I might have had a father or a mother that yelled all the time. And so if I'm dating you and I watch you in a restaurant and the waiter didn't bring the right food for you and you watch your date, start to shout at them. What's wrong with you? Why are bring my food. I ordered it. What are you not thinking? And you start to cringe because you would never do that because you think that's wrong. This is a person who's an employee. They're doing the best they can. So you get glimpses because life hands you those situations. But if you've defined for yourself, this is what I want, and don't compromise that.
So it's kind of going back to the values,
Yeah.
writing them down and knowing exactly what are, let's say, for example, me, I got to write down my values, what they are,
Right.
and kind of look for a person that has similar values.
Right. And they don't have to all be the same, of course. I mean, but they have to be, let's say it's different in what things that you enjoy, extracurricular things. That's a simple one. Okay. So if it's different, then I might say, well, tell me why you like that. What's that about? And then they might say to me, well, I never liked it before, but I'm enjoying it because I just love to see the energy of the people. So now I realize their view of it is one I hadn't even encountered. I hadn't even thought about. But now that allows me to grow. And that's the final piece I would say to you on your list. Fall in love with someone you can grow with. Because you're not going to be the same next year as you were this year, with any luck at all anyway. If you're growing, learning, accomplishing, then you want to be able to grow with someone. Many couples, statistically we know, divorce when the children go away to college. Why? Because they didn't invest in each other. They just invested in the children and the family unit. And now they're looking at a stranger across the table. I've had many spouses say to me, I don't know who he is. I don't know who she is. Where did she go? What happened?
Is that because they don't focus or they don't pay attention to their partners, their needs and all that?
Yeah.
Because of the kids?
Well, children are pretty demanding. I mean, and when you have children, they almost always are your number one priority because it's your job to protect and keep them safe and help them to grow. So it isn't that anyone purposely sets about to lose contact with their spouse, but child rearing is pretty demanding. And so they can get so focused on that they lose the focus of we're the main thing that has to stay connected. If we stay connected and in love with one another, our children will win. But it's so easy because parenting is a very tough job. It's a joyous job. It's very tough.
Does it make any difference that how many children a person can have that this sort of thing happens, or it doesn't really matter?
I've tried to research that before, and I don't think statistically that matters. It's more, again, what'll also happen is, what matters is whether or not you have the same value. You're trying to raise these children in the same way. The other thing that really shows up in new parenting is, the child turns 2 and says no to everything. And dad says, you got to hit him on his bum. You got to give him a quick swat. And mom is going, we're never going to hit this child, right? Now, how we solve that as the couple, as the parent, is what will keep us together. We don't have to agree at first, but we have to step back privately and say, wait a minute, we're raising this child together. We have to accommodate both ways. And that gets lost very easily. The other thing the research tells us somewhat, which is changing because women are so much more in the workforce, women used to be much more, sublimate to men. Men were the breadwinners. They made the money. They made the rules. But they also were complaining. Lots of times men have said, she just loves those children, but she lost her love for me. The woman will say, I didn't have a choice. You were gone, 40 hours a week. I was home every day. And I had to do these things that you couldn't do. But again, without good communication over time, that causes the fracture in the parent.
Or what are some of the tips, or yeah, some of the tips that a couple can do, or some of the things that a couple can follow in a way to better their relationship, improve their relationship throughout the years, so they don't,
Lose touch with each
yeah,
other, right? You never ever take the person for granted, and you have to say that to yourself. This person is not expected to do what I want them to do. This person is allowed to have their own life, and I need to know when it harmonizes with mine. I think too that couples, they just lose the passion because they don't take time for it. You know, we sometimes say to couples, and women in particular will really resist this guidance. We can say to them, look, you have to at times schedule intimacy. And they go, I don't want to do that. If it isn't spontaneous, then I'm not excited enough to participate and I don't like it. And he's able to do that and I'm not. And then again, now we have this gap, right? And I'll say to them, well, then let's schedule it. And they roll their eyes and look at me like I'm crazy. I said, anything that's worth having and growing requires attention. You know, we buy plants, they don't grow without water and light and fertilizer. So it's learning as a couple, what do we have to do? And deciding together. The two of you sitting down and saying, I want us to grow. I don't want us to take each other for granted. I want us to grow. What does that look like to you? And you know, your spouse or your partner might say, always remember to take me on a date. Women, I can't tell you how many women have said to me, he used to bring me flowers, he doesn't anymore. He'll say, yeah, she used to make me feel like a king over my son, who's now her prince. You have to be able to remember, especially when children get involved, you're still the primary focus. Children will thrive when they see that kind of love. They also see how people solve problems, and they see love can grow.
I see. Yeah, the one that you mentioned is scheduling intimacy and all that. Yeah, I can see how scheduling is kind of it feels like it's gonna take away the
Right.
joy or the pleasure
Oh,
from the
sure,
activity,
sure.
but at the same time, I mean, if a relationship is suffering, I guess it would be a great way to
Well,
try it out at
and
least.
it's saying that this is important. And if it's not happening, the reason it doesn't happen spontaneously may have nothing to do with either partner, other than he's worked and he's exhausted, or she's worked and she's exhausted. They've got children that they're trying to deal with. And passion and love and all of that, fit that in where? You know, sometimes people look at me and they go, well, right, Sherry, where am I going to do that? I go, you'll make time to do it. And that again comes back to nothing is more important than that you and I stay connected. We do know that intimacy, regardless of how or what it is time of, it's vulnerable time. It's time of saying, you're my person and I'm connected with you. There's a lot of tactile feedback. When you don't have that, you're not feeding the plant. If love is the plant, you have to feed it. If you can do it spontaneously, that's fabulous. I don't know about your life, but my life, it gets a little crazy, right? And I can get lost in doing even what I love to do. You know, it's that there's a lot of discussion right now about work-life balance, and younger generations are much more aware of that. I grew up in a let's all be workaholics era, right? That was how we thought we'd get ahead. But we lost play. Intimacy is a time to be the most vulnerable you'll ever be. And then you let go, and you're more likely to have a connection and a renewed connection. If you can do it spontaneously, of course, that's best. Yeah. But it's pretty hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, of course, especially with today's technology and all that,
Yeah.
there's so much stress coming from work. I mean, even if you're home, you're still at
Right.
work. You still
Right.
get that email from the office saying that you need to finish this at this time, and you have to do it.
Well, that's where the technology shows up, right?
Mm,
So we don't end work at 5 o'clock any longer because you can email me, you can text me. And if it's my boss or if there's a big thing tomorrow that I have to be ready for, and we're used to paying attention to it. So it's again, it's like I say to families, phones don't go to a dinner table. And it's a rule you have to fight hard with kids because this is our time to share our day, to share our feelings, to share our thoughts, to be connected to each other. This device robs me of connection. And then I can't get along with very many people. We see kids who don't socialize at all. They just, you know, now, and I have a couple of young clients in their teens, 14, and they go, "But Sherry, I don't want to socialize." I go, "I know, but one day you're going to want to have a job, and yes, you can maybe work from home, but sooner or later you're going to be on a team somewhere in some work site. Short of you own the company and you're it, then you've got people that work for you. You've got to learn to do it.
yeah.
You can't do it with this self isolation."
Yeah. Is that something mostly introverts get into, like getting addicted to phones or
Oh, I don't think it's restricted to any personality type. I mean, I don't know the research that well, but no, I think it's just people who get into it more than someone else are usually dealing with emotional issues like I don't feel safe in the world and it's safer to do this and this pays me off. The other thing with an addictive process is you get high and then pretty soon the chemical owns you,
yeah.
but at first it feels great, right? So they recede into that to meet some need, to fill something that's missing. And it's false, but it fills it. And then if I'm an introvert and I don't like to be, I have an older son who's an introvert. He looks extroverted, but when he goes home from work, he's exhausted because he's had to interact with people. And he's like, and his wife has had to learn he's just going to be quiet for a couple hours. That's not because he doesn't want to talk to her. It's because he's overloaded because he's an introvert. So, yes, it's important to know those differences, but I don't think one or the other is more driven by technology.
Yeah, actually, I've heard a lot of arguments that people have. Usually, it's around what you said when the partner or the spouse, usually the male, comes home and he doesn't want to talk or anything. Usually, their wife or their spouse think they don't want
They don't want to talk to
yeah,
me.
exactly, yeah, they don't want to talk to them.
Right. They're just
So
overloaded. Yeah.
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 So do they, like, how long is it different in every person that how long they have to rest until they get until they get their mental energy back?
Oh, no, that would vary. But here's the thing. If your partner understands, if you can say, "Look, honey, I love talking to you. I'm just fried. I can't talk to another person. And I'm worried my boss is going to text me." Decide together. I'd like to have the next hour and a half to drink a beer and just sit here. Or she wants a glass of wine. And I just need can I have an hour? Then your job as the partner is to say, yes, as long as I know that after that hour, you'll come back and really be with me. You'll be attentive to me. We'll talk about what we want to do. If you can guarantee me that you can put it away, whatever that time is. For my son, it takes a couple of hours. But she knows that. So she's not feeling like I'm not being paid attention to, right? But he has to agree, I have to rejoin. I have to come back.
Mm.
And that would be harder for an introvert than an extrovert. My son's wife's a fabulous cook, so I'm sure she entices him out with some good dinners. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big introvert person, so I totally understand
Yeah.
that. Yeah, usually when I get home, especially if I have to talk to a lot of people, I'm exhausted at the end of the day.
It's more tiring for you.
Yeah,
It's much more tiring for you. Yeah.
yeah, I can see that.
I'm energized from talking. People who are introverted are like, can you just go away? Just leave me be. Right. Yeah. But it's again, if you're in partnership, going in to teach someone. Remember, they have to learn who you are. And you can say, look, I adore you and I want to be with you, but I find the way my brain is wired, the way I am, I can't take the overload. So I just need to know, can you understand that? And again, you talk that through and you decide together. Like you may, I need 3 hours, and your partner might say, I'm going to give you an hour and a half. Will that work? You negotiate.
Mm.
But it's because then you are a part of the solution to why this person needs that versus feeling rejected by their behavior. The other thing that happens with couples, what just popped into my mind, I have to teach couples all the time, you're not psychic. You'll hear so many partners say, she's not going to let me do that. She is going to say, no, you're always with your friends. And then he's going to say, all she ever does is go out with her friends and drink wine and then you'll say something and they don't say anything back. And then they'll say, see, and I said, excuse me, wait a minute. When were you able to read her mind? Why don't you try to figure out why she does what she does? Talk about it. You're not psychic. Don't ever assume in a relationship that you know what someone's behavior means. Ask them. You just frowned at me when I was at dinner with your mother. Why did you frown at me? Instead of, he frowned at me because she's never liked me. And there we go. And off they go to the races. And then they build a wall that didn't have to be built because we think we can read everyone's body language. We think, well, I've been with you for 10 years. I know exactly why you do what you do. No, you do not. No, you do not. You have to find out. And that's the key. Keep talking. Learn to talk. Learn to listen. But don't assume you know whatever anyone's thinking. And that's true in work. Your boss goes, comes up and throws something on the table and says, that needs to be done by 4:00. And you think, oh, he's such a. Instead, say, you seem kind of agitated about the 4:00 deadline. What's going on? Now he may say, oh, somebody, I just spilled the spaghetti. I was at lunch and I got spaghetti on my tie and I'm so embarrassed. And you're thinking, had nothing to do with me. But I took it as, oh, I've done something. Because I saw how he behaved. Just keep asking.
Yeah, I think communication is one of the most important things, especially in a relationship. Being open and telling each other if something is bothering
Right.
you, or if you don't like a person, I mean, your partner does something.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
yeah, or
have to. Yeah.
yeah,
But again, very few of us have really good communication skills. I'm really blessed in my work. I think one of the things that makes me different, I tell you in California, there's a therapist and an attorney on every corner. So there's a lot of choices. You have to understand how to communicate in an authentic way, which nurtures you and your partner. But that's a skill set that's not hard to learn. The biggest thing in communication is learn to listen. And we all say we do listen, but we don't. I can teach you a trick with children. If children keep repeating to you the same thing, you didn't hear them the first time. Otherwise, they just keep going at you. It's like, I said you're supposed to pick up your room, And they go, why, well, I don't feel like doing my room. And you say, no, that's the rule. You have to pick up. Well, I don't like, you're not communicating. You're getting ready to yell because he or she's not doing what you want. Instead, say, I'm really confused. This has been the rule forever. Help me understand what's going on. Now you have a dialogue.
yeah, yeah. I can see that.
Huge. It's really, really huge in all things. In relationship. Well, what isn't a relationship? The whole world's a relationship, really.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we have relationship pretty much with everyone, and
Everything,
yeah, everyone.
everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I saw a lot of videos on, I guess, these short videos on TikTok and Insta and all these social media platforms. There are different opinions. Some people, you see a lady on let's say behind the camera and saying that I want a man who's vulnerable and who can talk to me openly, and then on the other side you see someone else coming in and saying that no, I want a man who is strong, who can protect me, who never cries in front of me. What's the right way to do it? Is it different? I mean, of course, it's different in every person and individual, I guess. But is there like a common ground that how a person, generally, how a male or a female should act and react in a relationship, or how to communicate efficiently and effectively?
Um, well, first of all, let me comment just briefly on what you see on TikTok and Instagram and social. I mean, don't trust it. You know, if you really want to see what the research says, then go to a good site that has a research base, right? Because that's just an individual's opinion. I mean, I have opinions. I can tell you as a therapist, somebody asks me, will you do this? And I go, I don't do that. That doesn't jive with the way I believe therapy ought to go. It's all very different.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's actually the problem. And when you look at some of those posts, thousands and thousands of people like them, comment them, and save
yeah,
those posts. And when you look at the analysis on that video, it's insane because some people do take it as this is the reality. That's how a man or a woman
right.
should
That's
react.
right. I've found the Holy Grail. There it is. No. And so how do you solve that? You have your own Holy Grail. Ultimately, I think healthy relationships depend on you knowing yourself. You have to know you. You have to know what scares me, what makes me happy, what makes me sad. You know, so remember that list we talked about? I want someone who can be vulnerable. I want someone who also would protect me. Now, someone else might say, well, those two things don't go together. For me, they do, because I could say to a partner, I'm so amazed, I saw you cry at the movie, and that meant a lot to me. It meant that you were awake and feeling, and thank you for letting me see that. Another person might say, yeah, but then he won't protect you. That's not true at all. But you have to know yourself. What do I need? What do I want? And then try to find out what your partner needs and wants as well. And of course, when we love someone, we like to do for them. It's joyful, it's mutual. But there isn't any formula. I could refer you to 12 books and 12,000 videos, and there'll be a difference every single time. It's part of what causes confusion, right? Young people watch all that. Look what, you talked about body dysmorphia. So we have kids committing suicide because they're too fat. No one will love them. Really? Because no one is teaching them you're not your body, you're who's inside the body. But there's so much of a focus on things looking perfect. And we'd all like to be prettier and smarter and all of those things. That's the humanness of us. But we can't do it. We have to find our own. I always teach couples we're going to write our own rule book, our own date book, which is different between the two of you than it is with someone else, another couple that might come after you. We write an individual date book. But if you know yourself and if you can be true to yourself, that's another issue, isn't it? Sometimes I grew up in an era where women pleased men. That's what I was taught to do, not just men I would date, men in positions of authority. I mean, there's difference in generations. This generation is much more fluid, much more open to all different ways. But you got to know you. How can you find what you want if you don't know you? You can't. I mean, you'll find it, but it won't last. It'll just go. But they're not all meant to last. I got to keep remembering that, right?
Is there a way, is there a process that you can follow to
Yeah.
understand yourself?
Yeah. I think if you just spend a little bit of time, we can talk about meditation and self reflection, but it is helpful to just spend a few minutes a day with yourself and say, what did I like about myself yesterday? Some people do this before bed, that kind of thing. But if you look and you say, okay, yesterday was a nightmare, everything went wrong at work and people yelled and the kids and the dog died, all that stuff. What happened in the day where I thought I really felt good? What happened? What did I do? So reflecting, self-reflection, taking time once a day, at least once a week to say, what am I liking about myself? What's working for me? Then I might have a situation where I think I made a mistake or maybe I embarrassed myself. How do I know? So then I stop and I say, wait a minute, that was so embarrassing. I failed at that. And then what happens is I start to beat myself up. And that's the other tip I would give someone is learn self-compassion. Learn to say, I made a mistake and I'm embarrassed and I wish didn't happen. Why did I make it? What happened? What was going on? Was I scared? Was I embarrassed? Was I afraid? What was going on? When I reflect on that with compassion for myself, then I know, oh, next time I'm in that situation, I need to be able to say, wait a minute, don't be afraid, just think about it, right? So self reflection and self compassion, I think, are pretty essential for knowing yourself. Um, there are quizzes online you can take.
Mm.
I'm laughing, but just spend time thinking, why do I do what I do? It also can really help to look at your family of origin and to see, what did I learn? What did I learn about how to be me? Was I encouraged to be me? Was I nurtured or was I told, don't you stray too far from the business? Or the expectation that you'd go to college. You know, I have 3 children. 2 of them, when my baby son, who's now 30, so, but when he came to me and he said, Mom, I'm not going to college. And I went, oh, let's chat. Let's chat here a minute. And I said, tell me why. And he said, I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to incur the debt that my brother and sister had to incur because it doesn't work for me right now. And I said, okay, have you thought about how you'll be in 10 years? Have you thought about that? And he said, no, and I don't want to. And I said, okay, well, how are you going to pay for this? You know, so now you have a dialogue. And so he was given an opportunity to think, this is what I want that my mother doesn't want, doesn't please my mother. And so he was willing to say, I've thought this through. I know what I need. You all started a podcast. Something in you said, we can do it. And why do we want to do it? You had a reason. You met with people who also shared, there's a value. I would guarantee you that you have like values, at least in reference to this work, right? Yeah. And you knew yourself enough to say, I'm going to do that. You got there somewhat by, so looking at family of origin can be helpful. It doesn't mean that you're doomed if you weren't nurtured or told you could make it, but it does impact how you know yourself. Some people think that's self-absorbed. I used to worry I would be vain if I worried too much about myself. I thought, oh, I don't. My father thought his mother was very vain, and so it was well past college before I thought, maybe that isn't vain. I still have the desire to do it. I'm a good person. So it's beginning. You look back on that upbringing, and then you say, they gave it to me with love. It doesn't work for me now. It's not who I became. And so that can be helpful too in learning who you are.
So, what would be the difference between overthinking and reflection? Because overthinking, usually people do reflect on the thing they do, but in a negative way.
That's right. That's right. Overthinking causes what we call rumination, where I just relive it over and over and over and over in my mind. What's the difference? I ruminate when I'm afraid and when I'm scared and when I feel like I might have failed. So there's a fear there. So if I go over and over and overthink it, I'm trying to be perfect. If I'm trying to be perfect, somebody taught me that to really get affection and esteem, I have to be perfect. So when I'm not perfect, I'll figure it out. I'll just keep thinking and I'll think and I'll come up with different things. And then I start attacking myself. You should have figured that out the first time. What's the matter with you? Rumination is a very bad master. And overthinking is usually rumination, which means something scared me, something made me feel less esteem for myself. And if I overthink it, I'm trying to get it perfect. You might have been taught there's no such thing as perfection. However, that doesn't mean you don't think it couldn't fit you. And so I overthink so I can get it right. Reflection says, well, I don't like the way I did that. Why did I do that? I don't really know, but I didn't like it. I could see the response it caused was a problem. How else could I look at it? You know, we talk a lot in therapy about what's called growth mindset. So when I I teach clients all the time. When you start to self-criticize, let's stop and say, yes, I did that wrong. I'm not very smart. I shouldn't be doing this work. Da, da, da. Then stop and say, how else could I look at it? What else could I think about this? Well, I could say people are human and they make mistakes. I could say I've never had that experience before. How was I supposed to know what to do? That's opening my mind, and that stops criticism. So if you can teach anything, if you know anybody ruminating or overthinking, ask them to expand their mind and think, what else could it be? How else could it be?
But wouldn't that open their mind into like a spiraling type of thinking, into a more negative thoughts?
Well, then they're not really expanding their mind. They're finding proof that their original, I screwed up, I'm negative, they're just finding more reason. You have to, if you're in a growth mindset, you have to stop and say, okay, right now I think I'm an idiot. I messed that up. Yep. And then I can just run myself around for hours. Or I can say, am I really an idiot? Could I have done it different? How else could I look at this thing that I feel, which is that I made a terrible mistake? Maybe I could say, does anybody else make a mistake like this? How do I be human? How do I say to myself, well, I tried hard. I did the best I knew how. Now I've started in with compassion. Now I've started in and I say, wait a minute, wait. Self-compassion has to also be learned. We don't get a lot of practice. Schools, I worked in schools. I'm also a licensed speech pathologist. I worked in schools for a long, long time. And I remember always fighting to say, stop telling children what they do wrong and tell them what they do right. They know when they do wrong. They know when they, got 2 wrong on the spelling test. They don't need you to tell them that. You already marked it in a red pen on their paper. And what do they focus on? I missed 2. How'd you do today with your spelling test, sweetie? Oh, Mommy, I missed 2. How many did you get right? The difference in telling somebody what did you do right nurtures them to grow and experiment and to try to be different the next time. And then we need to get rid of all red pens. There should be no red pens in school.
I see. So it's kind of like looking at a situation. It doesn't matter how bad it is, just accepting the situation as is.
Yes.
And
That's
going forward. And plus, if you learn something from it, even better.
Right. But again, it's self-talk. I study the research because I study both speech pathology and psychology because those are my fields. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have had so much more research to teach us the power of words. Words, I love words, but we've learned that self-talk, that self-hatred, that negativity just nothing good comes from it. And so we've learned to teach people, watch your language. Watch what you say to yourself. I recommend my clients, I kid everybody, but I tell them, I want you to leave my session, this first session, and I want you to have a nickname for yourself, a positive nickname. And then sometimes they'll say, well, I don't have any. And I go, well, let's throw some together here. My nickname for myself is Sweet Pea. It's a name that I loved when I heard other people say it. So if I get really critical of myself, I'll stop and I'll say, well, Sweet Pea, there you go again. And instantly, I get away from punishing myself. Because that's what negative talk does. I'm punishing me. I'm saying I'm not worthy, I'm not smart enough, I'm not something enough. And words really, really matter.
Yeah, I can see that. If you repeat something enough times, at some point you'll believe it yourself.
Well, it's the truth, right? It's true, but it's not false. It's like sometimes clients look at me and they go, one, you're either teaching me to be schizophrenic and I'm talking to myself all the time, or you're like Pollyanna. And I said, no, you just try it. Try replacing one negative thought a day with something positive and just see what happens. You will get calmer. You will have less stress. We have these features in our brain, the amygdala, and we have our own internal pharmacy. You know what happens when you criticize yourself? You get the pharmacy opens up and sends adrenaline, cortisol, all the things that hurt us. So you're hurting yourself every time you beat yourself up with words. You are stopping yourself from being successful. So if instead you say, I don't really feel really strong about this, but I realize I'm human and it'll be okay, the pharmacy closes and now I can get dopamine and serotonin. And that's automatic. So it's like, if I know that I'm the one who's controlling the pharmacy, I want to have fight or flight. If there's a tiger in the bush, I want to have adrenaline. I want to run like heck. But I don't want to do that because my husband or child raised their voice to me. But that's what I do. Or they raise their voice and they're mad at me. Uh-oh, I messed up. Oh, dear. And even if I mess up, I have to stop and say, yeah, you did. Well, sweet pea, how else could you look at that? I was tired. I was stressed. I had a stomach ache. Then it's all solvable as well. It's very much easier.
Yes, it's kind of again going back to reflection. Any situation, reflect back on it and find the positive in it rather than negative.
Right. But it's a learned skill. We don't think positively right away, except when we play the lottery and then you think, why not me? It should be me. I might as well win it. But when it really matters, we're highly critical of ourselves. Highly critical. Nobody comes into my office who's filled with self-love. You don't come to a therapist. You come to say, there are demons in my head. I don't want to keep on doing this. Or I know that I'm pushing my spouse or partner away, or I'm yelling at my children whom I adore and I don't want to yell at them. And of course we have to understand what was scary, what went on that made you go that way. But that's all solvable. And then it's practicing next. And if you do make that mistake, you go back and you say to your spouse or your partner or your child, I got scared. I got scared. I was beating myself up. I'm so sorry, and I took it out on you, and I'm aware of it. And next time you just say, hey, there you go again. What are you afraid of?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, admitting that you were afraid or
Oh, huge. It's huge.
yeah, but is there a way that people can get used to that? Is there a process that you can use to make it easier on yourself, being able to be more open and admitting to that?
Well, if you stop and say to yourself, what am I getting out of not? Okay, so it is a skill. I mean, without a doubt, this isn't innately easy for us. I think it's true for babies. Which watch babies, they cry when they're unhappy and they smile and laugh, and So the process is acknowledging, I want to do this different, because if all the negative self-talk we also know is impacting our physical health. We know our physical health is deteriorating all the time. Part of that's food and other issues. But it's also because we're so hard on ourselves, at least in this country. I don't know other countries, but in this country. So the process, how do I get used to it? One, I have to make a decision. I don't want to be like this. I don't want to. But I'm scared. Okay, well, what am I scared of? I think I have great empathy for men, and I'm so hesitant to talk about it because of all the gender fluidity, but men have been enculturated to believe it's not strong. You're weak. And men don't have the same kind of conversations at the water cooler that women have. But we're enculturated different. We're taught that's good, that's okay. Men are taught that makes you weak, not okay, not a protector, someone might hurt me. Well, you're trying to go against years of conditioning. But you can say to the person you care about, help me be in touch with my feelings. I don't even know what they are. I have some men who say to me, I don't even know what you're talking about, Sherry. What makes me sad? What are you, crazy? I don't have time for sad. I got work to do. I go, okay, but somewhere there's a whole kaleidoscope of feelings. We just have to practice them. You have to do it with a safe person. Don't try to learn feelings with your boss or with someone that you're not getting along with, but someplace you're safe, a friend, a date, a child. Say, hey, I don't know why I feel scared of that. I feel most men will say to me, I feel embarrassed. When I show my feelings, I feel embarrassed. And I said, okay, let's talk about that. What messages did you get as a child? Who taught you that that's embarrassing to feel? And then once you can figure that out, which you can do on your own, doesn't always take a therapist, but a therapist can be helpful and move it more quickly, I think. And then to say, I don't have to keep doing what I was taught. I think your generation and the modern generation are learning to, I read all the time about how you want more work-life balance, and I think, wow, that's so admirable. But that also means that men are changing, that the culture is allowing you, teaching you that that will give you a better and a more successful and a richer life.
I mean, what was the reason that men's usually protect their emotions and they don't want to bring it to the surface, hiding it from everyone?
Well, they were taught that, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, my experience of that. And men for a long time were the ones in positions of authority. Men were responsible, we didn't have equality in the workplace. And so they weren't exposed to it. They were with other men. And heaven forbid. I laugh sometimes. Do you ever watch men in a room watching sports? It's a joy to watch because they're having so much fun. Listen to the conversation there and then go into the kitchen and listen to the women who are making the snacks or who are going to come in and watch. It's not always that rigid. That sounds so gender biased. But I'm just saying, listen to the difference in conversation. Because what are you going to say to your bro? Oh, I feel sad today. No, you're not going to say that. You're going to say, go Bears or go Rams. Well, you're just not. But when you're in a different situation with a friend, then you can say, hey, I got really pissed off when Fred said that. Do you ever get pissed off when Fred says stuff like that? Now you open the door. And another man said it might be okay for us to talk about this. I see more and more of that happening, at least in my practice. But it's a lot to unlearn. It's a lot to unlearn.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen some people opening up more and more, especially from male side.
Yeah.
But still, there is a bigger population of men that don't want to still bring up their emotion to the surface.
Right.
Yeah, they don't want to show any sort of weakness, as we call it.
Well, there are also different cultural demands, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, I'm not a specialist at all in the diversity of culture, but I understand that, it's again, if I have someone that comes into my office and it's maybe they're of Asian or Indian, I'll say to them, what did you learn? What does your culture teach? Because I won't know that. Once we know what that is, then we can say, okay, so you're trying to say it's okay to be more westernized, I guess, to change that up. But for some people, men in particular, if your dad and your grandpa are going to see you as weak if you start to show emotion, you're not sure you want to do that. But I tell them you can be selective where you do it. And that's where you go back to partnership and that connection. There has to be a place that I can find out what I believe and what I want and what I think is all right. Your life will be much richer. It's like a kaleidoscope. It really is.
But wouldn't that be kind of hard? It's similar to putting a mask on every time you're attending, let's say, a family gathering. You have to put a different mask. You're going out with friends, different mask, and you keep changing between all of it. Wouldn't that make any, causes any sort of thing in the future?
No, because I think you learn. I know I'm wearing a mask. When I'm with my dad and my grandpa or in my culture, or which may be very different, I want them to be comfortable with who I am. I just don't want to live it outside of this relationship. I don't want to continue that. It worked for them. and I want to honor them and respect them, and so I will put the mask on for that culture. But but in my life over here, I want to be a thinking, feeling man who can relate to his children and his partner much differently than I learned, than I grew up. You also get to be a teacher if you want. In other words, you can open the door with them and you can say, I know that you think it's weak, but I'm wondering if we could look at that or could we talk about that? You'd be surprised sometimes. I've seen clients try that. And then a grandparent, for example, might say, I could never have done it and I'm so glad you can. Keep on doing it. You know, and they found approval, which they never thought they would. But it's again goes back to communicate, talk about it. And if they say, don't talk about that, we're not talking about feelings, okay, then keep the mask on. But then you're safe in yourself. You know you're doing something out of respect for them, but you don't want to carry it over to your adult life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes some time to process it. It's a lot of masking and going back and forth between family and real life, your own
Hiding, right?
life.
You feel like you're hiding half the time, right? Yeah. But you know, the more you are comfortable with the difference that you choose. So if you say, look, I grew up thinking it was, you know, not masculine. I'm not going to be strong enough. I'm not going to be successful because of it. But I've learned that puts so many limits on me. And I even can look at my family of origin or these people and say, did I ever think they ever really got happy? Did they live a life I want? You might love them, but you may not want that life. You may say, look at the limits that it caused. Not that you have to tell them that, they don't see it. But you'd be surprised, a lot of people, especially as they age, will talk about, I wish I'd done it different. There's a wonderful film called Ezra, which is a story of an autistic young man, and I think it's a profound film because the dad is kind of going to protect and I'm going to do all these things, and the dad is exactly the same, and you can see where and why he is this way. And then he has this child who's unique and different, and to relate to him, he has to change. And then in the end, because he does, the father, the grandfather, says, "Oh my, look what I missed." So it's you could be a teacher if you want, rather than seeing it as a burden.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Trying, yeah, teaching it.
By doing it, or say, I mean, can you imagine going home and asking your dad, "How do you feel about that, Dad?" And he'd like, "What are you talking about?" Well, just say, "I don't know, just curious." When I think back to my childhood, I don't know what I know what you liked. I know what I was supposed to do. I just wonder what it was like for you. It's a gift to be able to open that door because sometimes they want to walk through it, but nobody offers it.
And it's kind of hard to know if the person, let's say the parents or grandparents that you want him to be open to that, you never know if they actually accept you or not. I think that's part of the fear that no one really, well, a lot of people doesn't really just go forward with this method, just going and
Right.
telling them that.
Right. You know, it's scary stuff. I think good communication can feel really scary. But again, I can walk through life with a cap on, or I can take it off and let the wind blow my hair, you know? But it is hard. It's not easy work. And it's not always supported in the workplace or in our schools or anywhere else. But more and more, as the world becomes more digital and we get losing connection, or at least we have to learn how to preserve it. I know I get really scared of it. You know, I think because I watch people around me becoming more withdrawn into themselves, and so I have to, with people that I love, say, "This scares me. You know, can we talk about that?" Of course, I'm a shrink, so everybody expects me to say that. You know, so easy. I have a license to do that. You know what I mean? But I do appreciate how challenging it is. I do.
Um, so we want to create actually a traditional on our podcast where we ask a last question. And our question for you is, if you could impart one piece of knowledge to everyone in the world, what would it be? And what would you choose to share to the world?
I really appreciated being able to read that question before I came, and it was a wonderful self reflection, and I thank you for that. I would say trust yourself. That's one. Expect the best and then stay in the moment. Because if you did those three things, your joy will be magnified.
Thank you for coming, Sherry.
My pleasure.